the Americans have brought forward the date of their departure from Afghanistan. After 20 years, the Taliban are taking over the country again. Today, in August 2021, Taliban says that they control 85% of Afghanistan. Hosna Jalil was 9 years old when 9/11 happened. She shares her experiences with us. What will happen to women like Hosna with the Americans and their allies leaving Afghanistan after 20 years of promoting democracy? What future for little girls aged 9 in a country controlled by the Taliban? This is Between Us, Stories of Unconscious Bias, and I am Smita Tharoor. Hello, I'd like to introduce Hosna Jalil. Hosna, aged 29, is the youngest ever politician in Afghanistan, holding the post of Deputy Minister of Women Affairs. Hosna is an independent, feminine, wandering soul, and I am hugely pleased that Hosna, sitting in Kabul, is making the time to talk to me sitting here in London. I should warn the listeners that sometimes the bandwidth in Kabul lets us down a little bit, but I'm really grateful that you're making the time to have this conversation, Hosna. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Smita, for having me in a wonderful session.
So we're talking about unconscious bias, stories of unconscious bias. That's what you're going to be sharing with me. So before we even start sharing the stories, what do you understand by unconscious bias?
Bias is the behaviors, the preferences, or the attitudes that I've shaped over many years due to specific, I would say, knowledge or information that unconsciously I've got from my surroundings. So that is what I would call my unconscious biases.
Yeah, and so what does that look like then? So when you're saying from your surroundings, could you expand a little bit on that?
Well, when I'm saying about my surroundings, there are certain, I would say, behaviors that unconsciously I have, or attitudes or preferences, as I mentioned, that I never judge them, or I never question them. Like, how did I get it? Do I have a legitimate or valid root to the certain behavior or attitude or mentality, even the way I think, even? Is there a legitimate or a valid root to it? That is how I would say, how I would define the unconscious bias.
Okay, so can give us a little bit more context, Hosna. So when you're talking about some perhaps a feeling or an emotion or a behavior, what was that looking like when you were growing up in Afghanistan?
Well, I want to tell you about a story, actually,
Yeah.
that I would call it my very unconscious bias.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I'm starting the story with the word a masculine girl. The story is actually about a masculine girl. And I being actually raised in a male-dominated family during Taliban regime in a district of Afghanistan, far away from the major cities. I spent my childhood, watching or observing my surroundings. That in that surrounding, I would say our women have not been allowed to move out of the houses, or to even have a professional career, not at all, because that was according to the ruling system of Taliban. So whenever, and that led to a mentality being created unconsciously within me, that whenever I was thinking of a woman, there has been a word associated to that word woman. And that word associated to woman is the word dependent. And whenever I was thinking of being a woman, the first thing that I could think of is being a dependent individual, or a dependent human being who is fed by a man, but at the same time who works day and night, but at the same time not rewarded like a man. On the other hand, that was what I could observe from all the female members of my family. But on the other side, I had my mother. And my mother could go out, could have a professional career, because she was a medical doctor, and she was allowed to move out and to work at a hospital. But at the end of the day, I wanted to imagine my mom as an independent woman. But at the end of the day, I still had the same mentality towards my mom. Like, my mom was not also an independent woman. She was dependent, because She could not own her own earnings. She could not own the property she was buying from her personal earnings, because all had to be registered under my dad's name. Her money was managed by my dad. And end of the day, so what? She's still a dependent woman. She makes efforts. She works days and nights, but at the end of the day, she's not allowed to buy property under her own name or register property. And that is why I kept, I would say, associating the word dependent to the word woman. But on the other side, because I was the only girl child in my family, and I used to, I would say, unconsciously to develop the habits of a boy, like the way, the attitude of a masculine, I would say, attitude, a masculine behavior, a masculine mentality, even at some point in time. And I was taking actually the pride of being a masculine girl, because that word masculine for me was associated unconsciously to the word strength, to the word independent. Or I would say at some point in time, I was also benefiting from that word masculine, or the word masculine girl, because I was allowed to move out of the home. I was allowed to be, I would say, to play with the boys in the neighborhood. I was allowed to take a bike and to ride the bike with my fellow, I would say, boys in the neighborhood. And that is how I was taking the
How old
pride.
were you at this point, Hosna? How old were you?
Between 5 to 10.
Right. Now,
I
this
mean,
is
this
really
journey
interesting.
has been between 5 to 10.
Okay. And I want to just capture for the listeners and for myself what you've said about words and our unconscious biases towards them, because I think that is really fascinating. And the fact that when you hear the word woman, automatically you have another word that connects to the word woman, which is dependent. And that to you is a negative word, because despite the fact that your mother is out there earning a living, bringing in money, a medical doctor, she is still seen as someone who is dependent, who doesn't have a voice because of the Taliban's influence on how everything is run by men. It's patriarchal. And then, of course, on the other side of the coin, what you have another word, which is the idea of the word masculine, but connected to woman. So a masculine woman makes a woman independent. And that is your instinctive unconscious bias. I find that fascinating. And the fact that you can ride a bike. Now, I know many of us in the West don't know enough of Afghanistan, but certainly during the time when the Taliban were in charge, riding a bike or anything that girls were not allowed to do anything at all. They had to stay at home, and they weren't offered education. They were certainly not allowed to go riding a bike with boys in the streets of wherever you lived in Afghanistan. So it was exceptional that you had these opportunities. And I just want us to appreciate that. But yes, please do continue, Hosna.
Thank you. Uh, but at the same time, I was deep down. I mean, I'm telling you, like, unconsciously, I developed that, I would say, mentality of, if I wanted to be a strong girl, an independent girl, I had to be masculine, and that's why I was taking the pride, which was wrong. On the other side, I mean, when I used to take the pride and I used to appreciate being a masculine girl, until I ended up having, I would say, struggling health-wise, struggling with ITP, with a blood disorder. And I was struggling between ITP and leukemia. And I was sometimes I was diagnosed as ITP, sometimes I was diagnosed as leukemia, and I went through severe depression, actually. So that is when I consider that. That's why I'm grateful, actually, to that blood disorder, to my blood disorder, because that was like an awakening point in my life. That was when I picked words consciously, and I would say I reshaped my behaviors consciously, not how my surroundings had shaped it, or the mentality of my surroundings or the words they've been using has been shaping it. So I would say I realized that showing off as a masculine, the masculine side of me, I would say, or the reason I am saying why did I take the pride, actually, because I was benefiting it, as I mentioned, because I was allowed to go to madrasa, for example, and I was the only girl child being able to to madrasa because I just didn't want it to be left behind in that family where everyone could have access to education. And the madrasa or the religious studies was the only option, educational option for me. But end of the day, I just wanted to maintain that confidence within me, like I'm not anything lower than anyone else. That is how I was benefiting it. But when I went through the, I would say the blood disorder issues, and that was very much associated to severe depression actually. And I was a teenage, I would say, when I had this blood disorder. And I'm coming back why I'm grateful to that incident happened in my life, because as I mentioned, I consciously picked so many I would say words, and around those words I reshaped my behaviors. um, I ended up going to regularly visiting a psychologist for my depression. It wasn't just the medication for the ITP or sometimes the medication for leukemia, but it was also the visiting the regularly the psychologist for severe depression. And I ended up going to psychiatrist for depression, and I was taking medicine that was a higher level. To be honest, it did not help me a lot. It was just helping me in order to stay calm. It wasn't helping me in order to recover. And I'm telling you now, how did I recover with that? How did I mean, the picking the conscious, the words consciously, or the reshaping my behaviors consciously, how did it help me? I would say I started ignoring how the society judges me, because I was in a point where I was between life and death, and I didn't have anything else to lose actually. And I stopped at some point in time taking care of or caring about how society would judge me, how they would call me. I mean, the words they would use towards me, or would they I mean, how do I look in their eyes? I stopped caring about it. I ignored all of them, because I was like, okay, at any point in time, I'm gone. And what should I do with the I would say the good or the bad reputation society would shape for me? And what happened? I started taking care of whatever, or started reshaping my lifestyle, the habits, the I would say the behaviors, the attitudes, the mentality that could make me happy. And what was actually interesting, what was making me happy, was what was in common between all those behaviors, or I would say the attitudes or the activities. What was in common between all of them has been a feminine flavor.
So what you're saying is the fact that here you were, zero to a certain age, when you were diagnosed with a blood disorder, but until then
I
you were
was
proud
17.
to be. You were 17. So 0 to
Yeah.
17, you were proud to be this masculine woman, where you had the
Yes.
opportunities to go cycling, you would have the opportunities to go and study in a madrasa, and many things that little girls could not do. But then you had what's literally called a life or death situation, because you were seriously ill, which then it required that you even had to go and have, you were going to see a psychologist for mental health and so on. But none of that was what helped you. What helped you is you turned the tables, correct me if I'm wrong, and
True.
began to appreciate the importance of being feminine as opposed to being masculine. Is that what you're
True.
saying?
Yeah.
So
Because
what does that look like though? Because we have to put this in context, Hosna, of where you are living. So,
mhm,
and you know better than I do that Afghanistan continues to be a patriarchal country, where men are given more respect, and perhaps women are not given the voice that they would like. So how does that work for you, age 17, 18, 19, and you are now saying, no, I need to be feminist? How do you still get your voice heard then?
um, well, it depends. Like in I mean, in my surrounding, like whoever has surrounded me or the environment that I have, um, if I would be embarrassed, that is what I came across. That is what I mean, experienced, I would say. When I was a masculine girl, I was still being judged. I was thinking I won't be judged, actually. I was being judged. And when I started, in order to cope with my depression, I would say, in order to get out of that depression, I started doing whatever could make me happy. And whatever actually that could make me happy, that has been, I would say, the very feminine inner interest of me that I had ignored for many, many years, just to look like a strong personality or a strong individual. And that was actually a fake confidence that was given to me. So what I would say now, I was being judged at that point in time, but I was coming across to everyone as a confident person. But then when I went through depression and I changed the entire, I would say, behaviors that I used to have, because I started, what could make me happy during that depressed time that I had in my life, what could make me happy was a nail polish, was a red lipstick, was a very feminine chit chat with my mother. And then I figured out, like, okay, wait a moment. The individual that I used to be, that I had to be actually, that was not, or the behaviors or the attitudes that I had towards, or even the lifestyle, that was just not matching with how I'm made. I'm made a feminine individual personality, or I'm made, I am a female actually, with so many feminine sides of me. But the lifestyle that I have picked just to be a confident person, just to show off that I am someone with the same caliber like all my male, I would say, fellows, I had to pretend that I am a masculine personality. No,
So
I
you
wasn't a
literally,
masculine personality. So
yeah,
what
so
I did,
what you
I
were
just
doing is
matched.
you just completely pushed aside one you were almost, I'm trying to imagine this. It was almost like putting on, like being on stage and taking on a role. I'm thinking of Shakespeare and plays and so on, where a girl pretends to be a boy or a boy pretends to be a girl. And you're literally putting aside who you feel, how you feel about yourself instinctively, and pretend to be something else. But deep down, you are who
True.
you are.
Yes. And I didn't know actually, because I told you, I was benefiting from that lifestyle. I was not looking like, I was not wearing a boy's, I would say, clothing. I
No, of
was
course.
dressing like, but at the end of the day, I was pretending that I am a masculine person having a lifestyle like a boy. But then what I did actually, I matched how I'm made, or how I'm born, or how I am, like the inner components of me. I matched it with my lifestyle. And that is how I got out of depression. I didn't have to go to psychiatrist anymore. I was taking medicine. I was taking, advanced medicine for
So, what do you
depression.
mean by match it
And
with your
now what I would
lifestyle?
say,
I know, I'm just curious of that phrase you used. You said you matched it with my lifestyle. So yes, certainly the lovely things that women would enjoy doing, talking with your mom about feminine things and putting on lipstick or nail polish and those kind of things. Yes, but what else? What are the other kind of things that you
um,
did that match with your lifestyle?
well, presenting my feminine side, you just asked me the question. I'm returning back to that question. How do I voice my opinion
Mm-hmm.
in a male dominated environment?
Yeah.
Is because I am confident. I accepted I am a female. I accepted I'm a woman. I accepted that I do have all these feminine components in me, and that is not a weak point in me. So what I did, I matched, when I'm saying I matched who I am with my lifestyle, like my feminine side being a woman, with my lifestyle. That is something that I deep down I accepted who I am. I accept the fact, like, okay, if I want to have a happy life, but at the same time, if I want to be just myself, my true self, I have to be a female, not a masculine girl anymore. And that is where I got the confidence. And what I would say, how I presented, how I used to voice my opinion was because of that confidence, that inner, I would say, inner self-esteem. And I used to got that confidence and inner self-esteem from the word masculine, but today I'm getting it from I'm receiving it from the word
I
feminine,
love it. I love it.
because it is a matter of acceptance. Like, I used to accept, like, okay, a confident person has to be masculine, a strong person has to be masculine. But today the entire, like, I would say, my world has turned to a different, I would say, part of it,
So
the
what
different
you've
side.
done, Hosna, my understanding is what you've done is you've really come to terms with yourself.
True.
rather than, with who am I? How do I see myself? What is it that makes me tick? And genuinely, and it was in your, and I love the fact that you said it's because I see it, the fact that I had this blood disorder, I see that as a positive thing in my life because it allowed me to reflect and appreciate and understand who am I. And alongside
Very
the
true.
confidence that you had learnt and grown with from 0 to 17, you were able to continue with the confidence, but with a sense of your own true self. And I think that's very moving and very brave for you to share with us. So thank you for that, Husna.
And
Could you
I
could
think
you
that is that confidence is the common between before 17, 18 and after 17, 18. Being two different personalities, I would say, that is what can give me the strength to voice my opinion, to face whatever challenge I have, and to take on, I would say, challenges in a very male dominated environments, and to convince the male counterparts of me, like, I am a female, I am having my feminine side, but I'm equal to you.
Yes. And therefore you have to earn, they have to earn your respect because it is not just
True,
about man or woman, it's much more than that. And
true.
but I'm thinking about you going back to, so when you're 9 years old, um, until 0 to 9, the Taliban were in charge. And then when you were 9 years old, what happened was 9/11 happened, September the 11th, 2001, in the United States of America, which then many, many thousands of miles away, something happened, which then affected you in Afghanistan. Was there any impact on how you saw the world because of that?
Well, if I mean, talking of 9/11, on the other side of the world, and we being on this side of the world, I would say 9/11 was one of the worst incidents that could ever happen to the world, to the human being communities or the humanity. We lost a lot of living souls, many, many of them, and it's just not just numbers, of course. But then on the other side of the world, it was, I would say, a turning point. It was an opportunity for all those little girls and boys. I still remember, like, all these NATO soldiers and the US soldiers coming in, and I would say opening the governance structures, opening the schools for us. We've been so excited about it, to be honest, because that was the first experience I had at a normal school, and that was at the same time, deep down, that was giving me the I would say, the belief, like, this is something, like the girls school being open for me, this is something that don't have to struggle for it, I don't have to fight for it, this is something like a granted right to me. And that is why I would say I am grateful, for the fact, not for the 9/11 itself, but for the fact that Afghanistan was recognized as a country, and the human beings on this part of the planet has been considered like a normal human being, and they have been given the, I would say, the opportunity to feel like they are human beings, and they do have certain rights, even if they don't practice those rights. They do have it, like I did as a little girl. I did feel like, okay, this is a school and this is mine. I don't have to, I would say, to fight for it, like, this is relevant to boys, and I have to convince someone that I have to get access to this campus.
No,
No,
and
that
that's
was
lucky,
something.
you see, because I'm
Sure.
just thinking because you are age 29, which is why I mentioned your age right in the beginning. You have the advantage of the year, of the age that you are, because you were born when you were. And so when you were age 9 is when things began to change. And alongside your inner being and how you are and your sense of reality, you have been able to achieve. But certainly somebody who is, say, 20 years older than you may not have similar experiences. And similarly, what we do know, based on the news that we are reading, is that September 11th, 2021, the Americans are going to be pulling out from Afghanistan. So, what would that look like in terms of children who are born today in Afghanistan? I wonder. I mean, you may not have an answer, but I'm just thinking aloud with you.
Well, what I would say, I used to have, I mean, I do have my family members who are 20 years older than me. I do have, my mother is just 23 years older than me. they are exactly from the same generation that you mentioned, that they might not have the same feeling like I did back in post 9/11. They did have it because they had that feeling, like that positive feeling, much stronger than me. And the reason is because they have had a good life. My mother has been liberal. My mother has had the opportunity to go to medical school, to I would say to experience majority of the freedom, like normal freedom as a basic right to human beings. She did have that opportunity to experience and to practice most of them. But then there has been a dark side of her life, and that was the civil war and the Taliban regime. So what she, the reason that she had that very stronger feeling than me, like the positive feeling, was because she had tested the bright side of her life, and then there has been a dark chapter. So she knew like what the changes would bring to her, and that is why she was excited. But for me, being someone who was born, 2 years before the Taliban regime, and that has been the Mujahideen era, actually,
Mm-hmm.
and has not had the opportunity to have that very decent life. For me, I didn't have a lot to lose. I mean,
Ah, I see.
with the changes, and that is why I would say, because I had not experienced that's something,
You
and
were
I
still
didn't
little,
have the
yes.
vision. I could not visualize how the
Sure.
life would look like.
And
Children
this is
is exactly
fascinating,
like
fascinating,
I
Hosna.
used to be.
I wonder whether you could share another story with us about
Yeah,
your
sure.
understanding of unconscious bias.
Well, a second story I want to share is a little bit different, and that is about how how certain societies, or I would say even different societies, are shaping the mentality of the members of that society towards, I would say, certain ethnic groups, certain religions, certain geography, or I would say certain races. When I was a teenage, and I would say I was coming across individuals, or I would say human beings from different races, different like geography or whatever. It was so difficult for me to get along with them or to find a common language with them. It was very difficult. And it wasn't actually, now that I'm evaluating my behaviors, it wasn't because I wasn't social at all. I wasn't socializing with people who have been different than me. I wasn't, at the end, I can say that I wasn't appreciating diversity. I wasn't enjoying diversity. And I just wanted to be in my comfort zone with the people who looked like me, who spoke the same language like me, and at the same time who had the same mentality like me.
Yeah.
And the reason is because, for example, I'm giving you an example. When I was 20 years old, I entered American University of Afghanistan, where I had the opportunity to engage with foreigners, with Westerns, at the same time with students from different backgrounds, particularly the Afghans who had come from the Western countries or the other countries. For me, my comfort zone has been only those students, not even the lecturers, the students who had come from provinces, because they looked like me, and I felt like, okay, they're not going to judge me because we look the same. But at the same time, they looked good to me. I mean, anyone who looked different than me, I was good, and they haven't been good. They have been bad. So that was the unconscious, I would say, mentality I had around them. For example, being a Muslim, an Afghan. For me, like Jewish, Christians, and mainly Jewish, I would say, Christians and Westerners, didn't look good actually. For me, I'm like, okay, I can't get along with them. It's better not to talk to them. Or I would say, wasting my time if I socialize even with them, because we are too different, and even not appreciating those differences. But now I'm a different person after being able, I would say, in order to get to know them, at the same time being selecting, or I would say making decisions very consciously about my behavior towards people who are different than me. And today I've got friends, like many friends from Jewish community, from Christian community, from Hindus, from I would say Sikhs that we have in Afghanistan, and many other religions. I've got many friends, and to be honest, and from different races like Westerners, Easterners. To be very honest, as much as I enjoy today from all these differences with them, I don't enjoy the same with someone who looks like me today. And the reason is because at that point in time, I was unconsciously, my mentality was shaped unconsciously towards different people that was even, I would say, not allowing me to engage with them.
And when we are feeling safe with people because they look like us, they sound like us, we have the same values, we feel safe. Whereas our own unconscious bias kicks in when we look at somebody who is of a different language or a different religion. Visually, they look different to us, and we think, oh, maybe they won't understand. And it's all instinctive and unconscious. But of course, you've been able to challenge that unconscious bias, and you've been able to create friends, which is wonderful. But tell us a little bit, Hosna, about the fact that you hold a post of Deputy Minister of Women Affairs. Now, what does that look like in terms of work? Have you had any unconscious bias stories around your work and how you manage to do what you do?
Yes, when I moved from Ministry of Interior Affairs to Ministry of Women Affairs, I was told, because that was a very masculine environment and this is a very feminine environment, actually. It's not just a matter of the employees we have, it's also a matter of the issues that we deal on a daily basis or the policy papers that I'm writing. I was told that you can't get along with that environment. And I did actually unconsciously believe in it because I was watching myself on a daily basis, like today and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, like how I'm going to fail it, how I'm going to fail this mission, because I'm coming from a masculine environment. I had got along with it. But now coming to a feminine environment, the management of even the staff, the female staff would be difficult for me. But then what I can say, that was unconsciously somehow injected in me. But what I can say, moving around different provinces, different districts, villages in Afghanistan and visiting all these women, what I can say, I am much successful in this mission compared to my previous mission. And as much as I enjoyed this mission, I didn't enjoy the other mission. I did it actually. I worked with my heart and my mind in that mission. But this is a better one. Not just because I'm more experienced, but also because I found the ability within me to understand what a woman is going through. But at the same time, it is a learning process for me too. I mean, it's an exchange. I deliver, but at the same time, I learn something.
Which is
and that
fantastic.
is something
It's an
that I would
exchange,
say
yeah.
unconsciously, telling me unconsciously, my unconscious, I would say, bias is telling me that you can't succeed in this mission because it's a complete different environment, and managing the female portfolio or the women portfolio is going to be difficult because women are complicated. No, women are the simplest individuals on this planet.
Wonderful. I love that. Please, listeners, I hope you're all appreciating what Hosna is saying. Yes, women, we are simple individuals. That's not the myth that is created by many people, though. But then, so Hosna, because I could talk forever and more, but there are you. I would love for you to tell us all, the listeners and myself, so how do you manage your unconscious biases? Because that's there, this is the culture you're working in, you're living in, and you're learning. You said there's an exchange. I love that word you used, and that you have exchange of ideas and you're learning all the time. But what else do you do to manage your unconscious biases?
I would say I keep learning, and at the same time, I keep questioning my behaviors, my attitudes on a daily basis, on an hour basis, on a minutes basis. Whenever I would say I behave in a certain way, then I immediately question, like, okay, how did I shape it? How did I start practicing this specific behavior? Or how did I start believing in something like that? So that is what leads to me, like, questioning consistently a specific behavior, or I would say attitude or belief, that is leading me to a path where I can say, like, okay, now this is the route. And now I would say breaking the roots down like how the roots has shaped it, and then making a decision like, okay, is that the right, I would say, beliefs that I have, or I have to reshape it, or I have to change it. For example, I used to believe whatever a mullah says, because I'm a Muslim, whatever a mullah says, that is Islam. So there has been, I would say, there has been certain beliefs that I had heard or I had learned from a mullah about Islam. And part of that is the differences that I mentioned with the geography or the different religions. But then I was like, okay, if I don't have to respect a Jewish or a Christian or a Hindu just because they are having different religions, they are practicing different religions, how did I get this belief actually? And I'm questioning that belief. The roots of that belief. How did I get it? I go back and I figure out like, okay, that's a mullah who has told me. And now I'm going back to the main root of it. And I figure out in the main root that my God, like the God for everyone is quite same actually. And we have got different ways. My God is telling me like, love every single human being on this planet because I've created them. All of you are having the same gods. So that is something I would say the belief is changed because the root has changed. And now I've made a conscious decision for the basis of this the same belief, I would say. And that is why it has changed my mentality towards certain things. And all
I think that's
can
brilliant.
say how I'm managing it is I keep questioning the roots for certain, I would say, preferences or behaviors or beliefs.
In fact, if I were to summarize, Hosna, because what you've said is very profound and very powerful, and I think the listeners are really going to appreciate this. But if I were to summarize, it actually, if I think about you, 0 to 17, you had a certain self-belief about being your choice was masculine makes you independent, feminine makes you dependent. Then when you were 17, and therefore you had certain experiences and certain skills, and you learned to be confident and all of those things, which you might not have had if you had not gone down that path of being masculine or masculinely behaved. But then when you were 17, and because you were unwell, it gave you time to stop and think and reflect. And
True.
that reflection is not just today or yesterday. It has been happening from the age of 17, and probably even instinctively before that. Because it sounds to me that you're a naturally reflective person. And now what you said, because you're getting older, and perhaps therefore, hopefully all of us get wiser as we get older. So now age 29, you're saying, yes, I am reflecting and I am now looking at the roots of it. But I suspect you looked at the roots of that even when you were 17, is how I see it. We have learned a lot from you, Hosna, about Afghanistan, about feminism, about self-belief, about how we see ourselves, and of course about the country that you are living in and doing such good work for the women of Afghanistan. Hosna Jalil, thank you so very much for sharing your stories of unconscious bias with me.
Thank you so much for having me in such a wonderful session. And I consider this session like a therapy, another therapy. But at the same time, I keep enjoying listening to the podcasts that you have uploaded. And I look forward to many wonderful other podcasts that you will be uploading. I look forward to all of them.
Thank you so much, Hosna.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please do share with someone. That's the best promotion the podcast can have. The more we hear these amazing and brave stories from speakers around the world, the more we can learn about this important subject of unconscious bias. I'm Smita Tharoor. See you next week.